Chapter 1. The feeding begins. Allison stared at the spreadsheet on her screen, her fingers aching from typing for hours without a break. She glanced up at the clock, 10 p.m. She had long since missed dinner. She wasn't exactly surprised. After all, she was used to Jake's surprise late-night projects. The man had an uncanny ability to time his urgent requests right after hours when she had just about given up on life. Just as she was about to reach for her half-empty coffee cup, the door to the office swung open with a speed that could only mean one thing: Jake was back. Her heart sank, her shoulders tensed. It was like he could sense when she was about to take a break, and then he would swoop in to remind her that she was too valuable to stop working. Allison. His deep, gravelly voice made her stiffen. She hadn't even heard him come in, but there he was, standing by her desk like a looming mountain of quiet power. His dark eyes softened a little as he crossed the room, and before she could blink, he placed a takeout box in front of her. "Eat." His tone was firm, like a command, but she could tell there was a touch of something. Concerned? No, probably not. She was reading too much into it. "Mr. Jake, I'm really not hungry," she protested weakly, knowing full well that refusing him would only lead to him staring at her in that way, the one that made her feel like she was a disappointing employee. His brow furrowed, his lips pressing into a thin line. He wasn't the type to argue, but he wasn't going to let her off the hook so easily either. "You're not leaving until you eat," he said, the words not leaving much room for negotiation. Allison sighed, leaning back in her chair, defeated. She had tried to resist this on countless occasions. But here she was again, being forced into eating yet another meal, the remnants of which would surely end up in her hospital visits. As she hesitated, Jake slid the box closer to her. "I'll stay here and make sure you eat." He was dead serious. His usually cold demeanor softened just enough for Allison to notice, though it didn't stop her from internally rolling her eyes. She wasn't his personal project, but apparently, he didn't see it that way. "Fine," she mumbled, taking the chopsticks from the box, "but I'm not eating all of it." The last time she had eaten a full meal, she had ended up in the ER, her body rejecting all the stress and lack of sleep. Jake didn't say anything, just stared at her like he was waiting for her to finish. It was so typical. He wasn't even eating. Of course, that was the problem. He never ate with her. Not once had he sat down for a meal in front of her, probably because he was too busy being a workaholic. Allison sighed again, this time more dramatically. "You know, Jake, you're going to be the death of me." He tilted his head slightly, his eyes locking with hers in that unsettlingly intense way he always did when he was listening. "What do you mean?" "Well, it's obvious," she said with a half-smile, using humor to deflect the genuine concern in her voice. "Every month, I end up in the hospital, all because you insist that I eat a full meal every time I'm on the verge of exhaustion." Jake's expression didn't change. In fact, it seemed to harden, like she had said something that made him uncomfortable. "You should eat," he said again, but this time, there was something different in his voice. Was it guilt? Allison let out a breath, her usual sarcasm leaving her. "I'm fine. You're just overdoing it, you know?" She had no idea why she was opening up to him now of all times, but the exhaustion was getting to her, and she couldn't help but talk. "I never wanted this. I didn't want to be your personal secretary, much less be treated like your pet project. But here I am, eating your overpriced takeout because I have no choice." Jake didn't flinch, didn't back down, but there was something in the way his gaze softened even more. "I'm not trying to control you, Allison. I don't know how to show you I care." He said it so quietly that she almost thought she had imagined it. Allison's heart gave an uncomfortable lurch, and she quickly looked away, trying to reassert her professional facade. "Well, you're doing a terrible job of it." There was a pause before Jake spoke again, his voice a little hesitant. "I know. But I'm trying. It's hard for me to express things." Allison blinked, caught off guard. She had never heard him sound so vulnerable. Maybe there was more to Jake than the ruthless business tycoon she had always known, and then he did something that sent her heart racing. He sat down beside her. It wasn't the usual "I'm watching over you like a hawk" sort of thing. It was casual. Almost like he was trying to be a normal human being. Before Allison could process what was happening, he reached for her chopsticks and grabbed the last piece of sushi, holding it out to her. "Just one more bite. Please." She stared at the sushi in his hand, then at his face. The intensity was gone, replaced by a strange gentleness. She sighed again but took the sushi, not because she was hungry, but because she knew that in some weird way, this was Jake's attempt at being human. "You're impossible," she muttered under her breath, chewing the sushi and trying to hide the fluttering in her chest. Jake smirked slightly, leaning back in his chair. "I know." And just like that, for the first time, Allison wasn't completely angry at him, but deep down, she knew that the battle was far from over. Jake wasn't just her boss. He was a complicated, overbearing, and incredibly difficult person. And the last thing she wanted was for this to turn into a relationship. But then why did it feel like the walls around her heart were slowly crumbling? Chapter 2. The accidental confession. Allison had always thought that when she got her second chance, her new life after nearly burning out from overwork, she would do things differently. She would find a job that respected her boundaries. She would prioritize her health. She would stay far away from people like Jake, but there she was again, sitting in his office late into the night, trying to focus on her work while also trying to avoid the obvious connection that was slowly starting to form between them. The sushi from last night was long gone, but the strange warmth of Jake's unexpected gentleness lingered. She tried to convince herself it didn't mean anything. It was just a moment of weakness, right? He had shown concern for her health, and maybe that's all it was. A blip in his otherwise serious, stoic demeanor. That was all. Her phone buzzed on her desk, breaking her thoughts. She grabbed it quickly, relieved for the distraction. It was a message from her best friend, Clara. "Clara, you still alive? Or did Mr. Cold CEO work you into the ground again?" Allison smirked, her fingers flying over the keys. "Allison, just surviving. He actually let me take a break today. I think he might be trying to care." "Clara, what? Is this the same Jake we're talking about? The one who never says 2 words to anyone and scares the life out of you?" Allison hesitated before typing back. "Allison, yeah, that's the one. He made me eat sushi and actually sat with me for once. He's weird, Clara. But there's something. I don't know. Maybe he's not as bad as I thought." There was a long pause before Clara replied. "Clara, Allison, I swear, if you end up dating this guy, I will not be held responsible for the damage I do to your life. Please don't fall for the cold, brooding type. You deserve better." Allison rolled her eyes at the screen. Clara was dramatic, but she had a point. Jake had never been her type. Cold. Detached. Always working. Yet, Allison couldn't shake the odd feeling that he was trying to change. And maybe, just maybe, it was for her. Before she could respond, the door to Jake's office creaked open, and there he was again. Not the cold, distant boss she was used to, but the one who'd tried to make her eat sushi. He was wearing a light jacket and holding a coffee cup in one hand. "Allison," Jake started, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "You should head home. It's late, and you look exhausted." Her heart gave a little jolt. The words seemed so simple, but coming from him, they felt different. He wasn't just dismissing her work or barking orders like usual. He was looking out for her. "I'm fine," Allison replied quickly, not wanting to let him see how much his concern was affecting her. "I'm just finishing up." He stepped closer to her desk, setting the coffee cup down gently. "You're not fine. You're overworking yourself." Again. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words. How could she explain that he was the reason she was so exhausted in the first place? That every time he pushed her harder, she felt like she was spiraling? How could she tell him that she was terrified of getting too close to him, of giving in to whatever this was between them? "I'm not a robot, Jake," she finally said, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "I have limits." Jake froze, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a brief silence before he spoke again. "I know. And I'm sorry. I never meant for you to feel like this." The sincerity in his voice caught Allison off guard. It was like he was finally seeing her not just as an employee, but as a person. And for a moment, she almost believed it, but then, without warning, Jake leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "You need to take care of yourself, Allison. You're important to me." The words hung in the air between them, and Allison's heart skipped a beat. She had to be imagining things. There was no way Jake, the man who had been nothing but a hard, unyielding boss to her, was saying this important to you, she repeated, blinking, almost in disbelief. Jake didn't look away. Yes. I don't know how to say it, but I care about you more than just as my secretary. And it's been killing me watching you work yourself into the ground. Allison couldn't speak for a moment. Her thoughts were jumbled, her breath a little shaky. He cared. He really cared about her. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. She had always thought Jake was just an arrogant workaholic who couldn't see past his own success. But now, standing in front of her with those serious eyes, he was different. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. She didn't know how to respond to this. Did she want to admit that she had been feeling the same way? That she was starting to care about him too? Before she could answer, Jake suddenly looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet. I'll let you get back to work, he stammered, clearly regretting his words, but as he turned to leave, Allison's heart did something unexpected. Without thinking, she called out, "Wait." Jake stopped, his back still to her. "Yeah. Jake, I don't know what you want from me," Allison said quickly, her voice rising slightly. "You say you care, but all you do is overwork me, keep me in the office, and force me to eat food I don't even want. And now you're what? Telling me you want more than that?" Jake's shoulders stiffened, and for a split second, she thought she had gone too far. Maybe she was being too harsh, but the words tumbled out anyway. "I don't know how to feel about you," she said, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. "I don't know if I should even want to." Jake turned slowly, his face unreadable. For a long, painful moment, he didn't say anything. Then, in the most unexpected move, he smiled. Not the cold, detached grin he usually wore, but a real smile, the kind that made him look almost human. "You don't have to figure it all out right now, Allison," he said, his voice gentle. "But maybe we can try to figure it out, together." Allison blinked, stunned, and watched as he walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, heart racing, completely unsure of what just happened. Chapter 3. The thin line between work and heart. The days following Jake's unexpected confession were a blur for Allison. Her mind couldn't quite settle. On one hand, she was still the same overworked secretary, buried under piles of paperwork. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Jake's words echoed in her mind at the most inconvenient times, and every interaction with him now carried a layer of confusion she wasn't sure how to navigate. It didn't help that every time she entered the office, Jake's presence seemed to have a different weight to it. He was still the same man, quiet, driven, and often consumed by work, but there was something more, something that made Allison's heart do strange little flips when he gave her that soft, concerned look. It wasn't the look of the boss who demanded results. It wasn't the look of the man who forced her to eat against her will. No, this was different. It was a look that suggested he wanted to care. He did care, but what did that mean for her? It was 9 p.m. on yet another grueling night when Jake appeared at her desk once more. This time, there was no sushi. No coffee. Just a folder filled with the latest project updates and a small sigh as he set it down in front of her. "Here's the report," he said, his voice quiet. "I need you to review it by tomorrow morning." Allison didn't look up immediately, her fingers paused over the keyboard. She felt the weight of his eyes on her, as if he was waiting for her to react. But this wasn't about the report. It never was anymore, was it? "Jake," she began, her voice surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her, "you've been really different lately." Jake didn't answer immediately, and for a moment, the silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. He simply stood there, watching her. Allison's fingers drummed against the desk, her eyes meeting his without flinching. "Do you even realize it?" she continued, trying to make sense of her own feelings. "One minute, you're acting like my boss, pushing me to the edge. The next minute, you're looking at me like I'm something more. And I know," Jake interrupted gently. His voice was still low, but there was no hesitation this time. "I know I've been confusing." He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "But I can't keep pretending that I don't care. I can't keep pretending that I don't want something more, something real." Allison's heart skipped a beat. It felt like the floor had been pulled from beneath her. Was he really saying this? Did he really want something more? Or was she just getting swept up in the moment, caught in the flurry of emotions that came with being stuck in this strange dynamic with him? "I'm sorry," Jake continued, his voice a little rough now. "I've been too hard on you. I didn't know how to handle it. I don't know how to handle you." Allison stood frozen, her mind working overtime to process his words. There was so much to unpack here. She had spent so much time trying to protect herself from getting involved with Jake. But now, with him standing so close, looking at her like that, she wasn't sure she had any more defenses left. She swallowed hard. "Jake, her voice faltered, the words stuck in her throat. What could she say to him? Could she admit that she had started feeling something too? That maybe, just maybe, she did want more than this endless cycle of work and exhaustion. Before she could form a response, Jake stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "I don't expect you to have all the answers, Allison," he said softly. I don't want to keep pushing you away. I don't want to make you feel like this is all about work. I'm tired of pretending it's all business when it's clearly more than that for me." Her pulse quickened at the sincerity in his voice. Allison was caught between the part of her that wanted to run as far away from this confusing situation as possible and the part of her that wanted to take a leap of faith and see where this would go. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I need time to figure things out, Jake. I need to figure out what this is." Jake nodded slowly, his eyes filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Allison. I'm not going anywhere." The softness in his voice made her heart ache in a way she hadn't expected. She had spent so long keeping her distance, convincing herself that Jake was just a workaholic boss who didn't care about anyone other than himself. But the more she saw of him, the more she realized there was so much more beneath the surface. Allison sat back in her chair, her fingers clutching the edge of the desk as she let out a shaky breath. "I don't know what I'm doing, Jake. But I don't want to keep pretending that this is all just business. I care about you too." The words slipped out before she could stop them, but once they were said, they felt like a weight lifted off her chest. She looked at him, waiting for his reaction, her heart pounding. Jake's expression softened, a small but genuine smile tugging at his lips. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear that." For a moment, everything felt quiet and still, like the world outside the office had faded away. And in that silence, Allison realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something she hadn't dared to hope for. Chapter 4. The next few days passed in a blur. Allison found herself tangled in the whirlwind of work, but there was something different now. Jake, for all his stoic, business-driven exterior, seemed to be trying harder. The small gestures of kindness, like offering her coffee without being asked or checking in on her health, didn't go unnoticed. He still had a long way to go, but it was a start. And to Allison's surprise, she was beginning to look forward to these moments, no matter how fleeting. But it wasn't just the work that was consuming her. The confession they shared had opened a door she hadn't known she was standing in front of. Every glance they exchanged seemed charged with unspoken tension, and each meeting felt like they were walking a fine line between friendship and something else entirely. It was a Wednesday evening when Jake unexpectedly stopped by her desk again, this time with an air of determination she couldn't quite place. Allison looked up from the documents she was reviewing and blinked as he approached. "Allison," Jake said, his tone serious yet softer than usual, "you've been working late all week. It's time you took a break." Allison raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that your job? Telling me to work late?" she teased, but the lightness in her voice didn't quite reach her eyes. She was exhausted, and yet something about his insistence tugged at her. Jake cracked a small smile, but it didn't quite reach the level of amusement she expected. "I think I've been doing the opposite of that lately. You deserve a real break. Come to dinner with me tonight. No work. Just food. And you." Her heart skipped a beat. The offer was unexpected. Allison wasn't used to being invited out by her boss. It felt almost intimate. She considered declining. After all, she had a mountain of tasks to finish, but something in his earnest expression made her reconsider. "Dinner?" she echoed, stalling. She had no idea why she was hesitating. It wasn't like she had a solid excuse. Maybe she was just nervous, yeah. You can pick the place, Jake added, almost like he was trying to make it sound less formal, less intimidating. Allison opened her mouth, but before she could come up with a reasonable excuse, she felt the pressure of his gaze on her. It wasn't the demanding, commanding stare he often gave her. No, this time, it was different. There was a glimmer of something genuine there. He really wanted to spend time with her. Fine, she finally said, not quite sure why she was agreeing. But no fancy restaurants or anything. Just somewhere casual, okay? Jake nodded quickly. Deal. I'll pick you up at 7. As the clock ticked closer to 7 that evening, Allison couldn't help but feel a flutter of nerves. She hadn't spent much time outside of work with Jake, and the idea of dinner felt like a strange leap into unknown territory. What was he expecting? Was this just a casual dinner between colleagues? Or was this something more? When Jake arrived to pick her up, he was dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, his usual polished look softened into something more approachable. Allison, on the other hand, had settled for a cozy sweater and a pair of jeans, her attempt at comfort over style. You look good, Jake said, his voice unexpectedly warm, making her cheeks flush. Thanks, she replied, feeling the heat rise in her face. So, where are we going? Jake smiled a little and motioned for her to follow him. I've got a place in mind. You're going to like it. As they drove to the restaurant, Allison couldn't help but steal glances at Jake. For the first time, he seemed genuinely relaxed, his usual intensity subdued. He wasn't on his phone, checking emails, or discussing work. He was just with her. The restaurant Jake had chosen was a quiet, unassuming little bistro, the kind that didn't need to boast about being trendy because the food spoke for itself. They were seated at a corner table, away from the bustle of the main dining area. A candle flickered softly between them, adding a touch of warmth to the otherwise casual ambience. Jake glanced at her, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. So, no work talk tonight, he said with a small smile. You can tell me something about you. What do you do when you're not here? Allison blinked, surprised by the question. It wasn't one she was used to hearing from him. Jake had always kept their conversations work-focused, and now he was asking about her life outside the office. Well, she said slowly, thinking it over, I guess I mostly read or watch movies. Nothing too exciting. Jake raised an eyebrow. Nothing too exciting? That's hard to believe. You seem like someone who has a few hobbies that could surprise me. She smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I guess that's true. I've always been too busy to do much outside of work. But I guess, if I could do anything, I'd probably travel more. See the world. The confession felt strangely freeing. For so long, she had put her dreams and desires on hold, buried under deadlines and endless tasks. But now, with Jake sitting across from her, offering no judgment, it felt okay to admit that she had bigger dreams. I think you'd love that, Jake said, his voice soft. I think you'd love the chance to see things beyond this office. His words hung in the air, the unspoken connection between them growing stronger with every passing second. For a brief moment, Allison allowed herself to imagine a life beyond work, beyond the endless cycle she'd been stuck in. A life where she wasn't just surviving, but living. And maybe, just maybe, that life could include Jake. As the evening wore on, the conversation flowed easily between them. They talked about books, movies, and places they wanted to visit, and for the first time in a long time, Allison felt like she wasn't just a secretary trying to keep up with her demanding boss. She felt like she was being seen. And that realization left her both thrilled and terrified. By the time they finished dinner, the tension between them was almost palpable. Allison wasn't sure what to make of it. Was this just a one-time thing? Or was there something more growing between them? Jake stood as they finished their meal, a slight hesitation in his step. You ready to go? He asked, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Allison nodded, pushing back her chair. Yeah, I think so. As they left the restaurant and walked toward the car, she found herself thinking about all the possibilities that could come from this. Was she ready to take a leap of faith with Jake? Was she ready to see what happened if she let herself care for him, too? She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was starting to figure things out. Chapter 5. The following days at work felt like a delicate balance. Allison couldn't help but feel the weight of the dinner lingering between her and Jake. It wasn't just the fact that they had shared a quiet, intimate evening, it was the way it had shifted something in their dynamic. Every time he asked her about her well-being or made a small gesture to ease her workload, she couldn't ignore the fact that there was something more beneath the surface. But for Allison, these gestures of care came with a complicated undercurrent. How could she reconcile the boss who worked her to the bone with the man who seemed to genuinely care about her? Could she trust him not to drag her into a relationship she wasn't sure she was ready for? It didn't help that every time Jake glanced at her during their meetings, there was a softness in his eyes that wasn't there before. The way he lingered near her desk, as if he wanted to say something more but couldn't quite find the words, was enough to send her heart into a whirlwind. Allison did her best to keep things professional, burying herself in work as usual. But as much as she tried to ignore the quiet tension between them, it kept creeping up in the most unexpected moments. It was as if the line between work and personal life had been blurred beyond recognition. That Friday, after yet another late night of paperwork and reports, Jake caught Allison just as she was about to leave the office. She had hoped to slip out unnoticed, to avoid any awkward conversation, but Jake was always just a step behind. "Allison," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "I need you to stay. There's something we need to talk about." Allison froze mid-step. She had just about reached the door. She could feel her exhaustion creeping up on her. Another long week of work, another week of trying to juggle everything. She had barely managed to squeeze in a moment of rest. And now Jake was asking her to stay. "I'm really tired, Jake," she said, her voice a little softer than she intended. "I just want to go home for the night." Jake didn't budge. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her defenses. "Please. It'll only take a few minutes." The plea in his voice was enough to make Allison sigh in resignation. She turned back toward her desk, dropping her bag beside her chair. "All right," she muttered, rubbing her temple. "What's this about?" Jake took a deep breath and sat down across from her, the usual confident, controlling air about him momentarily gone. He looked vulnerable, for once. "I know I've been a lot overbearing, even. And I know I've put a lot of pressure on you." Allison didn't say anything immediately. She just watched him, unsure where he was going with this. She had grown used to Jake being blunt, but this felt different. There was a hesitation to his words, as though he was trying to find the right thing to say. "I care about you," Jake continued, the words coming out more quietly than usual. "And I know I haven't been the best at showing it. Hell, I don't even know how to show it properly. But I don't want to keep pushing you away or making you feel like you're just here to do my bidding. I don't want to lose you." Allison blinked, her heart suddenly racing in her chest. She had expected many things from Jake: an order, a reprimand, maybe even another awkward attempt to force her into doing something she didn't want to do, but this was something entirely new. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign that he was just saying this to soften her up. But there was nothing in his expression but sincerity. He was laying himself bare, and for the first time in a long time, Allison realized that maybe he wasn't just the boss she had to please. Maybe he was someone who, despite his flaws, genuinely wanted to be a better person. "For her, Jake," she said softly, finally breaking the silence. "You don't have to do this. I don't need you to prove anything. We've both been living in this work bubble for so long, I don't even know where to begin with us." Jake looked at her, his eyes searching, like he was waiting for her to make the next move. "I know. I don't expect things to change overnight. But maybe we could start small. I don't want to keep hiding how I feel." Her breath caught in her throat. His honesty was both refreshing and terrifying. Allison had always prided herself on keeping her emotions under control, especially when it came to Jake. But now, with the way he was looking at her, all that resolve was starting to crumble. "I'm scared too, Jake," she confessed before she could stop herself. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm ready to let you in." Jake's face softened, and he leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You don't have to be ready right away. I just want to be here, in whatever way you need me to be. We can take it slow." Allison let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. For the first time in a while, she felt like there was a possibility for something beyond the chaos of work and exhaustion. Maybe it didn't need to be this complicated. Maybe they could start with small moments, just getting to know each other outside of the office, without the weight of deadlines and expectations hanging over them. She nodded slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Okay. We can take it slow. Jake's smile was small but genuine. Thank you, he said softly. That's all I needed to hear. Allison exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but at least, for now, they were taking the first step together. And that, in itself, felt like progress. As she left the office that night, her heart was lighter than it had been in a long time. The future was still uncertain, but maybe it was time to stop running from it. Maybe it was time to take a chance. Chapter 6. The days after that quiet conversation with Jake felt like walking on a tightrope. Allison found herself balancing between the comfortable rhythm of work and the underlying shift in her relationship with her boss. She had agreed to take things slow, but there were moments when she wondered if the pace was slow enough. The tiny shifts, Jake's lingering glances, his insistence on her well-being, his subtle attempts at making her smile, didn't go unnoticed. They were small, almost imperceptible, but they made Allison question everything. She tried to focus on her tasks. She really did. But it was hard not to notice the subtle changes in the way Jake interacted with her. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just his employee, she was someone he cared about. Jake had given her space to breathe, to process what had happened, but he had also made it clear that he wasn't going anywhere. That evening, as Allison stayed late in the office once again, she felt the familiar presence of Jake by her side. You're still here? Jake's voice came from the doorway, his tone more casual than usual. Allison looked up from her stack of paperwork, offering a small smile. It's a habit at this point. The work never stops. Jake leaned against the doorframe, folding his arms. Maybe I should stop you from working so much. It's not healthy. She chuckled, though it was strained. You're one to talk. You're always at work. Touché, he replied, raising an eyebrow. But at least I make time for dinner now. Allison's heart fluttered at the mention of their previous dinner together. It had been a turning point, one that she hadn't fully processed yet. She knew she should have been more cautious, more wary, but somehow, when she was around him, everything felt different. And maybe that was what scared her the most. She glanced at the clock and then back at the unfinished work in front of her. I've still got a few things to wrap up. Jake pushed himself off the doorframe and walked toward her desk, his steps slow and deliberate. He placed his hands on the edge of the table, leaning in slightly. Allison, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you're trying to avoid me. The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. She froze, unsure how to respond. Was she avoiding him? She didn't want to be, but it felt like every time she let her guard down, she was walking deeper into unknown territory. I'm not avoiding you, Jake, she said, her voice soft. I'm still figuring this out. Us. This whole thing. Jake's gaze softened, and for a moment, Allison thought she saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He nodded, straightening up from his leaning position. I get it. We don't have to rush things. I just want you to know. I'm here. Whenever you're ready. Her chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice. She wasn't ready. She wasn't sure if she ever would be. But part of her longed to take that step, to stop fighting against whatever this was between them. Thanks, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile before turning to leave. But just before he reached the door, he paused and glanced back over his shoulder. Allison, he said, his voice low. Don't overwork yourself. Take care of yourself. I mean it. With that, he left the office, leaving Allison alone with the weight of his words. She exhaled slowly, unsure what to make of everything. She had spent so long in survival mode, just getting through the days, that the idea of someone truly caring for her, beyond just her ability to get things done, felt foreign. And yet, with Jake, it felt possible. Maybe she could start taking care of herself. Maybe she could take care of them. The next day, Jake's words echoed in her mind. For the first time in ages, She took a break. She went to a nearby cafe, ordered a cup of coffee, and sat by the window, letting herself breathe. The hustle of the office, the constant deadlines, all seemed so distant in that moment. It was like she had rediscovered a part of herself she had long forgotten. As she sipped her coffee, she felt a strange sense of clarity. She didn't need to have everything figured out right away. She didn't have to rush into anything with Jake. She could take things one step at a time, and maybe, just maybe, things would work out. Later that afternoon, as Allison returned to the office, she found a small package sitting on her desk. There was no note, just a plain, simple box. She hesitated before opening it, her curiosity piqued. Inside, she found a small, delicate bracelet with a single charm in the shape of a key. Allison's breath caught in her throat as she turned the bracelet over in her hand. She didn't have to look far to realize who it had come from. It was Jake's subtle way of saying that he wanted to be the key to unlocking something more between them. For a moment, she stood there in silence, her heart racing. She had been afraid to let anyone in, but Jake's small, thoughtful gesture shattered that barrier. Maybe this was the start of something more. Something she could no longer deny. The bracelet was a reminder. A reminder that it was okay to take things slow, but it was also okay to open up, to trust. She smiled to herself, her fingers tracing the charm as she slid it onto her wrist. As the day wore on, Allison couldn't help but think of Jake and the future that seemed to lie just beyond her reach. She wasn't sure if she was ready to dive headfirst into a relationship with him, but maybe she didn't need to know all the answers yet. Maybe, for now, the small steps forward were enough, and maybe, just maybe, this new chapter of her life would begin with a little more faith, both in herself and in Jake. Chapter 7. Unexpected encounters. The following week passed by in a blur of meetings, deadlines, and brief moments of quiet. Allison found herself more at ease, or at least trying to be, with the growing bond between her and Jake. The bracelet, though small and simple, was a constant reminder of how much things had shifted between them. Every time she looked at it, a rush of warmth spread through her chest. She couldn't help but wonder what it meant, what Jake's intentions were. Jake, on the other hand, seemed as reserved as ever, but there was a new level of gentleness in his interactions with her. He no longer barked orders or stood over her shoulder with that intimidating air. Instead, he would pause to ask how she was doing, or if she was eating enough. It was subtle, but it was there. Allison tried not to overthink it, but her heart would always skip a beat when he would do something unexpectedly kind. Like when he dropped off a coffee at her desk on a particularly hectic morning, or when he'd tell her, with a glint of humor, to not work herself into the ground after she'd been staring at a report for hours. He'd smile at her, a rare thing, and in those moments, Allison wondered if Jake was slowly letting down his own guard. But despite these small moments, Allison remained cautious. She had to be. After all, she didn't know if Jake was just being, well, Jake, or if there was something more beneath the surface. She wasn't ready to admit it, but she was beginning to enjoy his company more than she'd care to admit. One late afternoon, as Allison was packing up for the day, she received an unexpected text from Jake. "I've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning, but there's something I need to discuss with you afterward. Can you meet me in the lounge?" Allison paused, reading the message twice. She hadn't expected Jake to reach out like this. It was casual, but there was an underlying tone of urgency. She quickly typed out a response, agreeing to meet him the next morning. After the meeting wrapped up, Allison found herself making her way to the lounge, her mind racing with possibilities. What could Jake want to discuss? Was it about work? Or something more personal? She reached the lounge, where Jake was already waiting, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment, their eyes locked. His gaze softened slightly, as if waiting for her to say something. "Anything you wanted to talk?" Allison asked, her voice a little more hesitant than she intended. Jake motioned for her to take a seat across from him. "Yeah. It's about us, I guess." Allison's heart skipped a beat. Her pulse quickened, and she forced herself to sit down, trying to keep her composure. "What about us?" Jake's expression was unreadable, his usual mask of control firmly in place, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot lately. I know I haven't exactly been the easiest boss to work for, and I know I haven't made it clear what I want from you. But I can't keep pretending that I don't care. I don't want to keep being your boss if that's all I am to you. Allison blinked, unsure of how to respond. This wasn't what she had expected at all. She had thought this conversation would revolve around work, or perhaps another one of Jake's usual quirks. But this felt different. His words were heavy, laden with an intensity she hadn't expected. "You're not just my boss, Jake," she finally managed to say, her voice softer than usual. "I mean, you've been a lot more than that lately. But I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel. I've been hurt before, and I don't know how to trust." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I get it. I do. And I don't expect you to trust me right away. But I'm not just doing this because I'm your boss, Allison. I want to be more than that. I want to be the person who takes care of you, not just the one who makes you work." Allison's mind raced. Jake's words, his sincerity, they were so unlike the boss she had come to know. He wasn't demanding her attention or control. He wasn't trying to overpower her. He was offering something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in for a long time. "Jake," she began slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know what to say. I've spent so long protecting myself, keeping a distance from people because I didn't want to get hurt. But with you, I don't know anymore." Jake's eyes softened, and he took a small step forward, his expression gentle. "I'm not asking you to make a decision now, Allison. I'm just asking for a chance. To let me prove that I'm more than just the boss who overworks you." She took a deep breath, feeling a rush of emotions surge within her. Could she really let her guard down? Could she take the risk? Before she could respond, the door to the lounge opened, and they both turned to see one of the company executives walk in. Jake immediately straightened up, his expression shifting back to his usual businesslike demeanor. "I'll let you get back to work," Jake said, his voice now distant, almost cold. "We'll talk more later." Allison nodded, though her heart was still racing. She wasn't sure what to make of the conversation. Had it really been a moment of vulnerability for him? Or was it just another one of his many attempts to keep her close, to keep her in his world of control? She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she didn't need to. As she left the lounge, she couldn't help but wonder where this path would lead. Could she really open her heart to Jake? Could she trust him, even with the scars from her past? Only time would tell. But for now, Allison was willing to take it one step at a time. Chapter 8. The weight of words. The days that followed the conversation in the lounge were filled with a curious mix of quiet tension and normalcy. Jake had retreated into his usual routine, keeping things professional, yet there was something different in the air when their paths crossed. Allison couldn't pinpoint it, but there was an undeniable shift. Jake was no longer just the aloof, overbearing boss. At least not entirely. His attention, though still sharp, seemed to linger on her longer than before. He made small gestures to check on her, but it wasn't the same as before. He wasn't asking if she was overworking herself. Instead, he seemed to want her to know that she mattered outside of the work she did for him. She was getting lost in this thought when her phone buzzed. It was a message from him. "Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. My place." Allison stared at the message for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the keys. It was simple. Too simple. She had been expecting another work-related question, or maybe an instruction to attend another meeting. But dinner. At his place. She wasn't sure how she felt about this. Was it still business? Or was this different? As the hour drew nearer, Allison stood in front of her closet, pulling out an outfit. She wasn't sure what kind of dinner this would be, business or something more personal, but she decided on something simple yet elegant. She couldn't bring herself to overthink it too much. After all, it was just dinner, right? When she arrived at his penthouse apartment, the door opened before she even had a chance to knock. Jake stood there, dressed casually in a black shirt and jeans, looking more approachable than she had ever seen him. He gave her a small smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You made it," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The apartment was spacious, modern, and well lit. A far cry from the cold, impersonal atmosphere of the office. The faint smell of something delicious wafted in the air as they walked into the dining room. The table was set for two, with soft candlelight flickering in the center. "Smells great," Allison commented, trying to keep the nerves from creeping into her voice. Jake's smile became more genuine as he motioned for her to take a seat. "I figured I'd cook. You know, since I'm always telling you to eat." He shrugged, clearly not used to hosting anyone in this personal space. "I hope you're not disappointed." Allison chuckled, feeling the tension ease ever so slightly. "I'm sure it's fine." As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally, too naturally, in fact. The usual awkward silences were absent. Jake asked about her day, her interests, her thoughts on the latest trends in the business world, while Allison found herself opening up more than she ever had in a long time. She was still cautious, still keeping a small distance, but there was a comfort in being with him like this, outside the office. "So, what's it like, being you?" Allison asked with a teasing glint in her eye. She wasn't sure if it was the wine or the casual setting, but she found herself asking questions she normally wouldn't. Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Being me? Yeah, you know. The whole rich air, business genius thing. Must be nice to have everything at your fingertips." Allison smiled, her voice light-hearted, but there was a certain curiosity behind her words. Jake leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, and took a moment before responding. "It's not all it's cracked up to be," he said with surprising honesty. "People expect a lot from me. I've been groomed for this position since I was a kid. And, honestly, sometimes I just want a break from all the expectations." Allison tilted her head, genuinely surprised. She had always assumed that people like Jake had it easy: money, power, the world at their feet. But in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, they weren't so different after all. "I guess that makes two of us," she said quietly, almost to herself. "People expect a lot from me, too. But I'm not sure I even know what I want yet." Jake's gaze softened, and for a moment, he said nothing. The quiet filled the space between them, and Allison could almost feel the weight of his words hanging in the air. It wasn't until she looked up at him that she noticed the intensity in his eyes. There was something there, something raw, something vulnerable, that she hadn't seen before. "I'm not going to pretend that I know what's going on in your head, Allison," Jake said, his voice quieter now, "but I know that you matter to me. More than you think." Allison froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. The words hung in the air like a delicate thread between them. She wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't ready to let him in, not entirely. But there was something about Jake, something in the way he was looking at her, the way his words resonated with her, that made her heart race. "Jake," she began, but the words didn't come out the way she intended. Before she could finish her sentence, there was a knock at the door, interrupting the moment. Both of them looked toward the door, but neither moved immediately. "Who's that?" Allison asked, puzzled. Jake blinked, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "No idea. I wasn't expecting anyone." He stood up, walking over to the door with a small sigh. As he opened it, Allison could hear muffled voices from the hallway, but she couldn't make out what they were saying. Jake's face went from neutral to serious in an instant, and he stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him. Allison sat there, unsure of what to make of it. This wasn't the evening she had expected. In fact, nothing about this situation seemed to follow the script she had written in her head. Jake had been opening up to her, allowing her to see a side of him she never thought existed, and now minutes passed before Jake returned, his expression unreadable. "Sorry about that," he said as he re-entered the room. "Business calls. I'll make sure it doesn't interrupt our dinner again." But Allison couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the situation than he was letting on. Something had shifted. And for some reason, she couldn't help but feel like she was on the verge of discovering something that would change everything. Chapter 9. Hidden Truths. The evening had shifted in a way Allison hadn't expected. What was meant to be a quiet dinner turned into something uncertain, something neither of them could quite define. Jake had returned from his brief conversation at the door, but there was a stiffness in his posture now, a tension in his voice. He tried to brush it off, but Allison couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unsaid. Jake refocused on their meal, his eyes no longer meeting hers as frequently. The easy rhythm of their conversation had faded, replaced by a heavy silence. Allison felt it, too, this invisible barrier that had suddenly cropped up between them. "Is everything all right?" Allison asked, breaking the silence, her voice tentative. Jake gave a stiff nod but didn't speak immediately. He placed his utensils down carefully, as if contemplating his next words. It's just business. Something came up. Nothing to worry about. Allison didn't buy it. She knew when someone was hiding something, especially after spending so much time working with Jake. There was always an underlying edge to his words, something that made her question the real truth. Jake, I don't mean to pry, she said, her tone softer now, but you've been acting different since that conversation. And that person at the door, what was that about? Jake's jaw clenched, but he didn't look at her. He stood up abruptly and walked over to the window, gazing out at the city lights. His posture was rigid, almost as though he was bracing himself for something. Allison, he started, his voice low and measured, I'm not perfect. Far from it. I've been trying to protect you from a lot of things, and it's been hard to keep everything in balance. Allison stood up, crossing the room to stand behind him, unsure of what to do with her own feelings. There was a vulnerability in his words, a crack in the armor that he had so carefully built around himself. I'm not some fragile thing, Jake, she replied, her voice steady. I can handle the truth. Whatever it is. Jake turned to face her, his eyes searching hers for a long moment. The room felt smaller, the weight of his unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. You've been getting sick a lot lately. I know it's because of the pressure I put on you, and it's not something I've ignored. But I don't want you to think that it's just about work, Allison. It's about something deeper. Something I've been trying to avoid telling you. Allison's heart raced as she processed his words. Her mind raced through possibilities, but she couldn't grasp the meaning behind them. What do you mean, something deeper? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake took a deep breath, stepping closer to her. I didn't ask you to work yourself into the ground. I didn't ask you to ignore your own health. But I've been keeping you close, not just because I need you professionally. He paused, and Allison could see the struggle in his eyes. I don't want to lose you. Not in any way. Allison's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, her mind spinning. Was this really happening? Was Jake confessing to her, admitting that his actions were driven by something more than just control or power? Before she could respond, the doorbell rang again, cutting through the intensity of the moment. Both of them froze, the interruption jarring. Jake looked at her, almost apologetically, before he turned and walked toward the door. Allison stood still, her mind racing. She couldn't process everything at once, Jake's admission, his confession, the way he was looking at her. She wasn't ready for all of this. Not yet. Jake opened the door, a well-dressed woman stepped into the apartment, her expression polite but slightly tense. Allison could feel her stomach churn as she observed the interaction. This wasn't just some business associate. The way Jake greeted her, almost too formally, made it clear that their relationship was more than just professional. Jake, the woman said in a smooth voice, I hope I'm not interrupting. No, not at all, Jake replied, his tone cool but polite. Allison, this is Emily. She's someone I've been working with recently. Emily, this is Allison, my personal secretary. Allison stood there, feeling an odd, uncomfortable twist in her chest. The introduction was casual, but there was something about the way Emily held herself, too composed, too confident, that set her on edge. She extended a polite hand, trying to hide the unease in her gut. It's nice to meet you, Allison, Emily said, her smile polite but calculating. Allison gave a stiff nod in return, but her mind was already working overtime. Who was this woman? And why did her presence feel like an unwelcome intrusion? Jake seemed to sense the tension, and his eyes darted between the two women, as if deciding how to address the situation. Emily's here to discuss a few business details. I'll be back in a moment, he said, his voice clipped. As he left the room with Emily, Allison stood alone in the quiet space. Her mind was swirling with questions, but one thought echoed louder than the others. What was Jake really hiding from her? The minutes dragged by as Allison tried to collect her thoughts. There was so much happening, so much between them that had gone unspoken. And yet, despite the confusion, there was a part of her that couldn't help but wonder if this was all a part of something bigger. She wasn't sure how much longer she could ignore the gnawing feeling in her chest. Something wasn't right. But what? Was Emily just another business partner, or was she something more? And if Jake was truly hiding something, what did that mean for them? The uncertainty felt suffocating, and Allison couldn't wait any longer to find out the truth. She needed answers. Chapter 10. Unraveling threads. Allison's heart raced as she stood alone in the spacious living room, the silence pressing in around her. Jake had stepped out with Emily, leaving her in the midst of questions that were fast becoming a tangled web. Who was Emily? Why had she appeared so suddenly, and why did the situation feel so off? She couldn't just stand here and let her mind spiral. She had to know more. Taking a deep breath, Allison glanced around the room. The faint sounds of muffled conversation drifted from the hallway, but she didn't move to eavesdrop. She was no longer interested in subtlety. She needed answers. The minutes felt like hours, the weight of the silence in the apartment thickening with every passing second. It wasn't long before Jake and Emily returned, their voices low but steady as they entered the living room. Allison, Jake called out, his tone neutral. I'll be with you in a moment. Emily gave Allison a small, tight-lipped smile before turning her attention back to Jake. I'll let you two finish up. We'll talk later about the details, she said, her voice smooth but tinged with something Allison couldn't quite place. As Emily turned and walked toward the door, Allison couldn't help but notice the way she lingered just a bit too long, her eyes flicking over to Jake and then back to Allison with an unreadable expression. For a split second, Allison could have sworn there was something almost possessive in her gaze. The door clicked shut behind Emily, and the air in the room shifted again. Jake stood there, watching Allison with a mix of apprehension and uncertainty. Allison could feel the walls closing in on her. Jake, she started, her voice catching in her throat. Who is she? Jake didn't answer right away. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. Emily is someone I've known for a while. We've worked together on a few projects, he said, but the way he said it didn't seem to fully explain the situation. And that's it? Allison pressed, her curiosity turning into something closer to suspicion. Jake's expression faltered, his gaze flicking away from hers for just a moment before he met her eyes again. Look, Allison, it's complicated. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. She crossed her arms, refusing to let him deflect the conversation. You're not answering my question, Jake. What's going on between you two? Jake's jaw tightened as he seemed to weigh his words. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than usual. It's not what you think. Emily and I used to be close, but it's over. It's been over for a while now. Allison narrowed her eyes. Then why does it feel like she's always around? Why does she seem so invested in you? Jake seemed to falter for a moment, but he didn't back down. She's been trying to get closer to me for business reasons. She's been trying to rekindle our working relationship. But I swear to you, there's nothing personal there anymore. I'm not interested in her like that. Allison let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. There was something in his voice that made her believe him. But she wasn't completely ready to let her guard down. She had spent too much time second-guessing everything Jake did, and she wasn't about to stop now, okay? But, she trailed off, trying to find the right words. I don't understand why you keep trying to keep me by your side if you're not interested in her. I don't get why you want to keep me close, Jake. Jake's expression softened, and for a moment, Allison saw the vulnerability that he had been hiding for so long. I don't know how to say this without making it sound like I'm trying to control you, he began slowly. But it's not about control. It's about needing you. I know it's messed up, and I know it's complicated, but you're important to me, Allison. And not just because of the work you do. I don't want to lose you. His words hung in the air, each syllable carefully weighed, as if he was trying to find a way to express something he had kept locked away for too long. But Allison couldn't ignore the way they made her heart race. She wasn't sure whether it was because of the weight of his confession or because it felt like everything was slowly beginning to unravel before her. I don't know what to say, Allison murmured, her thoughts swirling. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect you to be so. She searched for the right word. Open. Jake stood there for a moment, looking at her as though waiting for some sign, some understanding. Finally, he spoke again, his voice filled with quiet resolve. You don't have to say anything right now, he said. But just know that I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to figure out how to make this work. I care about you, Allison. And I know that might scare you, but I just want to be honest with you." Allison didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. There was too much to unpack, too much to process. But Jake's sincerity was impossible to ignore. For the first time in their interactions, he wasn't the boss. He wasn't the aloof, distant figure who commanded respect. He was just a man, trying to figure out how to navigate feelings that were far more complicated than either of them could have imagined. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the situation hanging heavily between them. Allison began, but the words were stuck in her throat. She wasn't sure what she wanted to say anymore. She wasn't sure what she needed from him, or if she even needed anything at all. Jake, sensing her uncertainty, gave her space. "We don't have to rush anything," he said softly. "Take your time." But Allison knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. Not after tonight. And as she stood there, looking at him, she realized that the path forward wouldn't be easy. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth taking that first step. Chapter 11. A shift in perspective. The next few days felt different, and Allison couldn't quite pinpoint why. Jake had gone from being her distant, demanding boss to someone who was trying, really trying, to be something more, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. The shift in their dynamic was palpable, and it hung in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. Allison, for her part, wasn't sure how to act around him anymore. Should she continue being the professional secretary who followed his commands without question? Or should she let the new, fragile bond they had begun to form lead the way? The questions ran in circles in her mind, and she found herself distracted, losing focus at work in a way she hadn't before. Even simple tasks became harder to accomplish with the weight of Jake's confession looming over her. The tension between them was no longer just about business. There was something personal there, something Allison couldn't deny. But even so, she wasn't ready to jump into the unknown. She had to guard herself. She had to be smart about this. Allison was at her desk, sorting through paperwork when Jake appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. His expression was unreadable, but there was something softer in his gaze as he watched her. "Allison," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "can we talk?" Allison looked up from her work, meeting his eyes. "Sure, Jake. What's up?" Jake hesitated for a moment before walking into the room and pulling up a chair across from her desk. He sat down slowly, his fingers drumming nervously on the armrest. "Look, I know things have been weird between us lately," he began, his voice steady, but there was a vulnerability to it. "I don't expect you to have all the answers or even to know what to do with this whole situation. But I need to tell you something that I probably should have said a long time ago." Allison sat back in her chair, unsure of what to expect. She could feel her heart racing as she waited for him to continue. "Allison, I don't know, avoiding my feelings for too long," Jake admitted. "I've been pushing you away, making things harder for you. And it's not fair. You've been there for me through everything, and I've just treated you like a tool, a workhorse. But you're not just that. You're more than that." Allison's breath caught in her throat. The sincerity in Jake's voice was overwhelming. She hadn't expected him to be so open, so raw. And yet, here he was, telling her everything she'd been too afraid to ask. "I've never been good at expressing myself," he continued, his words coming slower now, "but I need you to know that I care about you. Not as a secretary, not as a worker, but as you. Allison, the person who makes my day a little brighter every time I see her." Allison blinked, stunned into silence. She hadn't realized just how much she'd been longing to hear those words until now. But she wasn't sure what to say. How could she answer him when her own feelings were a whirlwind? She leaned forward, her elbows resting on the desk, her hands clasped tightly together. "Jake, I don't know what to say. I'm not used to this. You've always been so distant, so controlled. And now this," she motioned between them, unsure of the words to express what she was feeling. Jake's gaze softened, and he reached across the desk, resting his hand on hers. The simple touch sent a shiver up Allison's spine, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. "I know I've made things hard for you," he said, his voice gentle. "And I'm sorry for that. But I want to try to make it right." I want to figure out how we can move forward together. But I need to know if you're willing to try, too. Allison's mind was racing. She had always been the responsible one, the one who kept her emotions in check. But in this moment, with Jake sitting in front of her, she couldn't deny the pull she felt. She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear: she couldn't ignore this connection between them any longer. I don't know if I'm ready for everything yet, Allison said, her voice trembling slightly. But I'll try. I'll try to understand, and I'll try to figure this out with you. Jake gave a small, relieved smile, his grip on her hand tightening just slightly. That's all I'm asking for. They sat there for a long moment, the silence comfortable now, filled with unspoken understanding. Jake's words had peeled back a layer of Allison's heart that she hadn't even known was there. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was living. Allison, Jake said quietly, his voice more serious now, I know I've been hard on you, but I don't want to push you anymore. I want to make sure you're okay. That's the most important thing to me. Allison looked at him, a smile tugging at her lips. I'm getting there, Jake. One step at a time. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, this could work. Maybe they could work, but she knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, it wouldn't be easy. They both had a lot of learning to do. But for the first time, Allison wasn't afraid of the future. They'd take it one step at a time, together. Chapter 12. Small wins. The days following Jake's confession were an odd mix of awkwardness and relief. It wasn't that things had dramatically changed overnight, but there was a new understanding between them. The atmosphere in the office was still the same: work piled up, deadlines loomed, but there was something different in the way they interacted now. A subtle, yet undeniable shift. Allison had always been a professional, and she wasn't about to let her personal feelings get in the way of her work. But there were moments, small moments, when she couldn't help but glance at Jake and wonder if things were changing in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't long before she realized that Jake, in his own way, was trying. He wasn't just giving her more space or being quieter. He was doing little things, thoughtful things, that spoke volumes. One morning, she arrived to find a coffee from her favorite shop sitting on her desk, a small note attached. Thought you might need this. And for the first time in a long time, Allison smiled, genuinely. It wasn't grand gestures or fancy gifts. It was the small, considerate things that made her heart flutter. Jake was learning how to be considerate, and that meant more to her than he could ever know. But even as the days passed and their interactions became more comfortable, Allison couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this, more to Jake's affections, that he wasn't saying. The reserved nature he'd always had was still there, lurking beneath the surface, and it left her wondering what he was really thinking. It was one late afternoon, when the office had emptied out and the city outside was bathed in the soft golden hues of sunset, that she decided to ask. Jake, she called out softly, her voice a little unsure. He looked up from his desk, his gaze meeting hers. His face was as impassive as ever, but she could see a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Yes? Allison stood by her desk, toying with a pen in her hand. Can we talk? Jake pushed back from his desk, standing and walking toward her. Of course. What's on your mind? For a moment, Allison hesitated. She wasn't sure if she wanted to bring this up now, wasn't sure if it was the right time, but something in her gut told her she had to ask. I'm still trying to figure out what this all means, Jake, she said, motioning between them. What are you really looking for here? Because I don't want to misread anything, or worse, make things more complicated than they need to be. Jake's brows furrowed slightly, and he took a small step closer to her. I've already told you, Allison. I care about you. I care about you more than I know how to say. But I'm not trying to rush you into anything. I know that's not fair. Allison's chest tightened at his words, but there was still so much she didn't understand. But why me, Jake? You've had plenty of other people around you, plenty of other people who could do this job, who could be with you. Why me? Jake's expression softened, and for a moment, it seemed like he was choosing his words carefully. Because, Allison, he began slowly, you're different. You've always been different. From the very beginning, you didn't treat me like some unreachable boss. You've challenged me, kept me grounded in ways no one else has. And I guess, somewhere along the way, I started to realize I didn't want to do this without you." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Allison's heart skipped a beat as she processed his words. He wasn't just talking about business anymore. He was talking about something real, something personal. "I never thought about it like that," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake stepped closer, his presence warm and steady. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I want to be honest with you. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm just asking that you give me a chance to show you that I can be more than just a boss to you." Allison felt a wave of emotion rush over her. This was exactly what she had been looking for, but hadn't known how to ask for. Jake wasn't asking for perfection. He wasn't demanding anything from her. He just wanted to try, wanted to take a chance on something neither of them fully understood. "I don't know where this will go," Allison said quietly, her heart still racing. "But I think I'm willing to try too." Jake's expression softened, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's all I'm asking for." For the first time in what felt like forever, Allison felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She didn't have to figure it all out at once. She didn't have to have all the answers. They stood there for a long moment, the quiet between them filled with possibilities. No grand declarations, no promises, just a mutual understanding that things were changing. And that, perhaps, was enough for now. Later that evening, Allison was at home, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea, when she received a message from Jake. It was simple, just a few words, but it made her heart flutter all the same. "I know it's late, but if you're free tomorrow, I'd like to take you out. No work talk. Just us." A smile tugged at Allison's lips as she typed her response, her fingers moving faster than she could think. "I'd like that." As she sent the message, a soft sense of calm washed over her. She wasn't sure where this was going, but for the first time, she was looking forward to finding out. Chapter 13. The dinner date. The next day, Allison found herself sitting in front of her wardrobe, contemplating the age-old question, what on earth does one wear on a date with their boss, who also happens to be someone you've been avoiding getting too close to for months? She wasn't sure if it was still technically a date. They hadn't defined it, and honestly, she didn't want to rush anything. But Jake had asked her to join him for dinner, and the simplicity of the request had made her heart race. It wasn't just any dinner, it was an invitation that meant something more than business, more than just a thank you for your hard work. After much deliberation, Allison finally settled on a simple yet elegant navy dress, nothing too flashy, but enough to make her feel confident. She wanted to look good for herself, not for anyone else. But knowing Jake was watching her made the decision feel a little weightier. When she arrived at the restaurant, Jake was already there, standing by the entrance and scanning the crowd. His suit was crisp and immaculate as always, and despite his usual quiet, intimidating demeanor, there was something softer about him tonight. His eyes caught hers, and for a moment, she swore he actually looked a little nervous. "Allison," he greeted her with a small smile. "I'm glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," she replied, her smile a little nervous too. She hadn't expected him to be so vulnerable. It was clear he was trying, and that made her heart do funny things. They sat down at a cozy table near the window, the soft lighting casting a warm glow over everything. The atmosphere was far from the rigid office environment they were used to. There was no pressure, no deadlines, just two people sitting down for a meal. The change in environment made the whole thing feel surreal, almost like they were in a different world. It was just the two of them. "So, how's everything at work?" Jake asked, leaning back in his chair as the waiter poured water into their glasses. Allison smiled, a little amused by the way Jake was trying so hard to sound casual. It was obvious that small talk didn't come easily to him. "It's fine, same old," she said. "I mean, I did have to chase down your assistant because they forgot to send a report to accounting, but other than that, smooth sailing." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You had to chase them down? I hope you didn't scare them too much." Allison chuckled. "They deserve a little scaring every now and then. Keeps them on their toes." Jake's lips quirked up at the corners, and for a moment, Allison thought she saw a hint of amusement in his otherwise stoic expression. It was the first time he'd genuinely laughed at something she said, and the sound of it made Allison feel a warmth spread through her chest. They talked about work, sure, but the conversation meandered into more personal territory as the night went on. They spoke about movies they liked, places they wanted to travel to, their favorite foods. It wasn't groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but it was easy. It felt natural, and that, Allison realized, was something she hadn't anticipated. Being with Jake like this, without the pressure, without the formalities, was nice. It was more than just getting to know her boss on a different level. It was about getting to know him, really getting to understand who he was beneath the carefully constructed persona of a successful, rich businessman. "I've always wanted to go to Italy," Jake admitted, taking a sip of his wine. "The food, the history, just seems like a place that would suit me. But I haven't had the time to go." Allison leaned back, thinking about it for a moment. "I'd love to visit Italy someday. The art, the culture. I think it's one of those places where you could get lost and never want to leave." Jake smiled at her. "You should go. It's one of those places you can't really explain unless you've been. I'll take you there, if you want." Allison blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "Take me? Like, as in, on a trip? To Italy?" Jake nodded, a glint of seriousness in his eyes. "Yeah, why not? We could make it a work thing, or just go for fun. It's a beautiful place, and I think you'd love it." Allison didn't know how to respond to that. Was he being serious? She hadn't expected him to throw something like that out there, but at the same time, it didn't seem like he was joking. Jake wasn't the type to make offhand comments for no reason. She laughed, a little nervous. "That's a bit sudden, don't you think? I mean, we just started getting to know each other outside of work." Jake's expression softened, and he reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "I'm serious, Allison. You've done so much for me. It's the least I could do. Plus, I think it would be fun. No business, no work talk. Just two people in Italy." Allison's breath caught in her throat at his touch. The simplicity of his gesture, the quiet sincerity in his eyes, it was a lot to process. She wasn't sure if she was ready for something like this, but the idea of traveling with Jake, experiencing a place so different, so full of life, it felt like an adventure waiting to happen. "I'll think about it," she said, trying to keep her tone light, though her heart was beating faster than she wanted to admit. Jake smiled, squeezing her hand gently before letting go. "No rush. Whenever you're ready." As the evening wore on and they finished their meal, Allison realized that things were slowly falling into place. Jake wasn't the monster boss she'd first thought he was. And she wasn't just his secretary anymore. They were two people, figuring out how to navigate a connection that neither of them fully understood, and maybe that was okay. Maybe it was enough for now. Chapter 14. A change of pace. The days after the dinner seemed to glide by, smooth but slightly surreal. Allison caught herself smiling more often than she had in the past, the memory of Jake's quiet sincerity lingering in her thoughts. She wasn't sure what exactly was happening between them, but there was an undeniable shift. The space between them wasn't just filled with work anymore, it felt like something more, something that, despite her best efforts, was impossible to ignore. She didn't rush things. She couldn't, not when her heart was still figuring out what it wanted. But the truth was, she liked what was happening. It felt easy. Jake, for his part, had become more considerate. He wasn't overbearing anymore, but there was a newfound respect in the way he spoke to her. He'd ask if she needed breaks, if she was comfortable, and most importantly, he stopped pressuring her with food. That last one was almost too good to be true, and Allison had to laugh at herself sometimes, because it was the small things that made her feel seen. It was another Friday afternoon, and the office had quieted down. Most people had left, and Jake was at his desk, as usual. But Allison wasn't just working today. She had something on her mind. Something she needed to address. She walked into his office, her steps light. "Jake." He glanced up, offering her that small smile that was becoming more familiar by the day. "Yes. I've been thinking," she started, hesitating for a moment. "About what you said the other night." Jake set down his pen, his expression shifting to one of curiosity. "About Italy?" Allison nodded, a little surprised that he remembered so clearly. "Yeah. About the trip. I wanted to ask, Do you really think we should do something like that? He leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced behind his head. Why not? He asked casually. It's not just about the trip. It's about getting to know each other outside of work. You've been there for me through all this crazy stuff, Allison. I think we both deserve to take a breather. She couldn't deny the truth in his words. They both had been working hard, endlessly, and it felt like they never really took a moment for themselves. But was a trip like that too much? Too soon? I'm just worried, she admitted. I don't want to make things more complicated than they already are. Jake's face softened, and he stood up, walking over to her. His presence was steady and calm. Allison, I've been nothing but honest with you, haven't I? This isn't about complicating things, it's about giving us both a chance to step outside of all the madness and figure out if there's something more. Just, let's see where it goes. Allison found herself thinking back to that night, the way he'd looked at her, the sincerity in his voice. He wasn't asking for a commitment, not in the way she thought he might. He was simply offering her the space to decide. And for the first time in a long time, Allison felt like she didn't have to rush into a decision. She could just breathe. I'll go with you, she said quietly, making up her mind in that moment. Jake's face lit up in a way that surprised her. He stepped closer, his expression soft with a mix of relief and something else, something tender. Really? She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Yeah. Let's go to Italy. Jake laughed, the sound a little more genuine than usual. You won't regret it, I promise. The rest of the day passed by in a blur, but Allison couldn't stop thinking about what she had just agreed to. Italy, of all places. She didn't know what it was about that trip, but it felt like the beginning of something new. And for once, she wasn't scared of it. The following week was filled with preparations for the trip. Flights were booked, hotel reservations made, and Jake sent her a list of places he thought they should visit. Every little detail felt more real, and with every message they exchanged about the trip, Allison could feel the tension between them starting to loosen. There was no rush. No pressure. Just the anticipation of a new experience, something that neither of them had done before. The night before they were set to leave, Allison found herself pacing in her apartment, double-checking her suitcase for the 10th time. It wasn't that she was nervous, well, maybe just a little, but more that she wasn't sure what this trip would mean for their relationship. They hadn't even defined what they were. But the thought of spending an entire week with Jake away from everything familiar felt like the right step forward. She checked her phone one more time. Ready for Italy tomorrow? Jake had messaged, ready as I'll ever be. Allison replied with a smile, I'll pick you up in the morning. Get some rest, okay? I'll make sure we both survive the flight. Allison chuckled at that, feeling an unexpected sense of warmth wash over her. It wasn't about the trip, not really. It was about the quiet reassurance that Jake was there, and that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something good. The next morning, as she stood at the door with her luggage, Allison couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. She was about to embark on an adventure with Jake. An adventure where, for once, there would be no work, no deadlines, and no boss-secretary dynamic. Just two people getting to know each other, no strings attached. Jake's car pulled up to her apartment, and as she stepped outside, she saw him waiting, his usual calm demeanor in place. But today, there was a little something else there, a soft, encouraging smile that made her heart beat a little faster. Let's go, he said, his voice warm. Allison nodded, taking a deep breath as she joined him in the car. They were off to Italy, and for the first time in a long while, Allison felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Chapter 15. Landing in Rome. The flight to Italy was long, but the excitement of what awaited made the hours fly by faster than Allison had expected. She had spent much of the time gazing out of the window, watching the clouds stretch beneath her, her mind racing with questions about the trip and what this new chapter with Jake might hold. Jake, on the other hand, was his usual calm, composed self. He sat next to her, occasionally glancing at his phone to check on business matters, but mostly content to just be present. He wasn't the type to talk much unless he had to, but Allison appreciated the silence. It felt comfortable, like they didn't have to fill every moment with words. When they finally landed at the Fiumicino airport in Rome, Allison was struck by the sheer beauty of the place. The air felt different here, warmer, more relaxed. The hustle and bustle of the airport only heightened the feeling that she was stepping into another world. Jake had arranged for a private driver to take them to their hotel, and the drive through the streets of Rome was nothing short of magical. Allison couldn't stop staring at the ancient buildings, the winding streets, and the vibrant energy that seemed to pulse through the city. As they pulled up to their hotel, a luxurious but cozy boutique in the heart of the city, Allison felt her nerves tingle. She wasn't sure what to expect from this trip, but everything about the place, the elegance, the charm, the romance of it all, felt like the perfect backdrop for what had been an unexpected journey. You like it? Jake asked, catching her awestruck expression as they exited the car. It's beautiful, Allison replied softly. It's everything I imagined Rome would be. Jake smiled, the softest smile she'd ever seen on him. I'm glad. Let's get settled in, and then we can take a walk around the city. There's a place I know that has the best gelato. Gelato? Allison raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I'm sold. The hotel lobby was just as stunning as the outside, with marble floors, elegant chandeliers, and rich, warm colors that gave the space an inviting, cozy feel. Jake had clearly gone above and beyond to make sure everything was perfect. After checking in and getting their room keys, they made their way up to the suite. The room was spacious, with a balcony that overlooked the city. It was the kind of place that felt like a dream: soft, luxurious bedding, a seating area by the window, and beautiful artwork on the walls. Allison set her suitcase down by the bed and took a deep breath, her mind still spinning. She was in Rome, with Jake. And everything was about to change. I'll give you some time to settle in, Jake said, stepping toward the door. I'll meet you downstairs in 20 minutes, and we can head out for that gelato. Allison nodded, her heart fluttering with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. I'll be ready, she said, trying to sound casual. Jake paused at the door and looked back at her, his gaze soft. Take your time, Allison. I'm not in a rush. We have all the time in the world. And in that moment, Allison felt it. The weight of what they had, this unexpected, quiet connection, was finally beginning to feel like it could be something more. Something real. With a deep breath, Allison stepped onto the balcony, the cool breeze of Rome brushing against her skin. The city was alive, vibrant, and full of stories, and somehow, she felt like her story was just beginning. Chapter 16. Exploring Rome. Allison stood on the balcony for a few minutes, taking in the breathtaking view of the city. The sun had started to set, casting a golden glow over the rooftops and ancient buildings. She felt a strange sense of calm, as if the city itself was embracing her. Maybe it was the romance of it all, or maybe it was the fact that for once, she wasn't overwhelmed by the constant demands of work and life. This trip was a breath of fresh air, a chance to reset, to reconnect with herself, and maybe even to understand Jake a little better. She didn't have much time to ponder it, though, before Jake knocked lightly on the door. Ready? He asked, a faint smile on his lips as he stood in the doorway. He had changed into something casual, a black jacket, a plain white t-shirt, and jeans, his look effortlessly stylish, even in the simplicity. Allison nodded, her heart fluttering. Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. They headed out of the hotel and into the evening air. The streets of Rome were busy but not overcrowded, the atmosphere filled with the hum of conversations in various languages, the scent of fresh pastries wafting from nearby cafes, and the distant sound of music. It was everything Allison had imagined, but better. The city was alive with stories that felt so much bigger than her daily routine. Jake led the way to a small, unassuming gelato shop tucked between two historic buildings. The place was cozy, with a few outdoor tables, and it had an authentic, charming vibe. Jake glanced at Allison as they approached the counter. What flavor are you going to try? He asked. Allison raised an eyebrow. I'm guessing you've been here before? Jake smirked. A few times. Trust me, you'll love it. They have the best pistachio flavor. Pistachio, huh? Allison couldn't hide her amusement. I'm not sure I trust your judgment after all the times you've tried to force-feed me. Jake laughed, the sound surprisingly warm and easy. Fair point, he admitted. But this is different. She gave him a skeptical look but couldn't resist the temptation. All right, I'll try the pistachio. But if it's not as good as you say, I'm blaming you. They stepped up to the counter, and Jake ordered for them both, getting pistachio for Allison and something a little more adventurous for himself, a combination of chocolate and hazelnut. As they waited, he leaned casually against the counter. "I used to come here a lot," Jake said, almost to himself. "Back when I first started visiting Rome for business. The place has a vibe that just makes everything feel simpler. You know?" Allison smiled at him, her curiosity piqued. "You sound like a romantic, Jake." Jake glanced over at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending I'm not." The gelato was handed to them, and they walked out onto the cobbled streets, savoring the first few bites. It was, without a doubt, the best gelato Allison had ever tasted. The pistachio was rich and smooth, with just the right amount of sweetness. "This is amazing," she said, grinning at Jake. "Okay, you win. This is actually perfect." Jake chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling with a hint of pride. "Told you." They continued walking, enjoying the atmosphere and the gelato. Allison found herself relaxing more with every step. The tension she'd carried for so long seemed to slip away, replaced by an unexpected sense of peace. After a while, they reached a small park that overlooked the Tiber River. The view was breathtaking, with the city lights shimmering in the distance and the ancient architecture lining the water. "Let's sit here for a while," Jake suggested, his voice gentle. "I think we could both use a break." Allison agreed, and they sat down on a bench overlooking the river. The sound of the water flowing was calming, and the view was almost too beautiful to believe. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They just sat there, side by side, enjoying the quiet company. "This is nice," Allison said softly, breaking the silence. "I didn't expect to feel so at ease with everything. You know?" Jake glanced at her, his expression soft. "I get it. Sometimes, the best moments are the quiet ones. No distractions. Just being present." Allison smiled at him, her heart a little lighter. She hadn't realized how much she needed a moment like this, how much she needed to slow down and just breathe. As the evening wore on, they continued to explore the city, wandering through charming streets and stopping at little cafes along the way. It wasn't just about sightseeing or the places they visited. It was about the simplicity of being together, without the weight of work or expectations hanging over them. By the time they returned to the hotel, Allison felt like she had experienced something truly special, a side of Jake that was patient, understanding, and surprisingly easy to be around. She wasn't sure where this trip would take them, or what it would mean for their relationship, but for the first time, she wasn't scared of the unknown. She was ready to take whatever came next, slowly, carefully, and with an open heart. Chapter 17. Unspoken words. The next morning, Allison woke up feeling a little different. It wasn't a drastic change, but there was a shift in the air, something new that she couldn't quite put her finger on. She had gotten used to the rush of her life, juggling work, stress, and the relentless pace of everything. But here, in Rome, she felt like she could breathe a little easier. Like time had slowed down just enough for her to see things clearly, and to think about what really mattered. She glanced over at the clock. It was still early, and Jake had promised to let her sleep in. The last few days had been a whirlwind of work and travel, but this morning was different. There was no immediate pressure to get up and deal with a never-ending pile of tasks. Allison stretched and slid out of bed, the soft sheets making a gentle rustling sound. She went over to the window and opened the curtains, letting the golden morning sunlight pour in. The view was still stunning. Rome looked even more magical in the early light, with the city bathed in soft hues of orange and pink. As she stood there, watching the world outside wake up, she felt a sense of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about the constant demands of her job, or the pressure Jake had put on her over the past few months. She wasn't thinking about the hospital visits or the overwork that had once dominated her life. She was thinking about the present, the moments she was living right now. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. "Allison? You awake?" Jake's voice called softly through the door. Allison smiled and turned away from the window. "Yeah, I'm up. Just enjoying the view." Jake stepped inside, holding 2 cups of coffee in his hands. His usual calm demeanor was intact, but there was a softness to him this morning that Allison hadn't seen before. It was subtle but undeniable. "I thought you might need this," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. "I'll never understand how you manage without caffeine." Allison took the cup, the warmth of it radiating through her hands. "You've been spoiling me lately." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Maybe you're just getting used to it." She chuckled, taking a sip of the coffee. It was strong, exactly the way she liked it. "I could get used to this," she said softly, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment. There was something there, a silent understanding that neither of them had spoken aloud. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sound the soft clink of the coffee cups as they adjusted them in their hands. It was as if the world outside had slowed down just for them, giving them the space to exist together without the usual rush of life pressing in. Jake finally broke the silence. "I was thinking we could take a walk around the city today. Maybe head to the Colosseum, or the Vatican. I don't know about you, but I've always loved the history here. It's overwhelming in the best way." Allison smiled at the mention of the Colosseum. "I've always wanted to see it. And I'd love to learn more about the history. I know next to nothing about it." "I could give you a private tour," Jake said with a mischievous grin. "I know all the best spots." She laughed, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I'll take you up on that." They spent the morning exploring the ancient landmarks of Rome. The Colosseum, as expected, was even more awe-inspiring in person. Allison found herself lost in the history of the place, imagining the gladiators and the grand battles that had taken place there centuries ago. Jake seemed to enjoy sharing his knowledge of the city with her, pointing out interesting facts and little-known details about the monuments they visited. They walked through the Roman Forum, marveled at the Pantheon, and then stopped for lunch in a quiet little trattoria tucked away in a side street. The food was, of course, incredible: fresh pasta, rich sauces, and a glass of wine that made everything feel a little bit more magical. As they sat there, enjoying the meal, Allison found herself looking at Jake differently. He had always been her boss, the man who had pushed her to the brink, the one who made her feel like she was constantly under pressure. But today, sitting across from him at a small table in a charming Roman cafe, she saw him in a new light. There was more to him than the hard exterior, the silence, and the overwhelming business persona he put on. He was human, just like her, with his own quiet dreams and desires. Maybe, just maybe, she could see beyond the walls he'd built around himself. "I never thought I'd be able to relax like this," Allison said, breaking the silence between them. "It's different, but good." Jake's eyes softened. "I know the feeling. Sometimes, it's hard to slow down, even when you know you need to." Allison looked at him, her gaze meeting his, and for a brief moment, there was an unspoken connection between them. It wasn't anything dramatic, but it was there, quiet, but real. "I'm glad you're here, Allison," Jake said quietly. "I've been trying to find the right way to say it, but I'm glad we're doing this together." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She didn't know what the future held for them, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to find out. Chapter 18. New beginnings. The evening sky was painted in hues of violet and gold as Allison and Jake made their way through the streets of Rome. The city had a way of transforming at dusk. Everything seemed quieter, more peaceful, yet filled with the promise of something new. It was as though the world held its breath, waiting for something important to unfold. Allison walked beside Jake, her steps in sync with his, the comfortable silence between them growing. She had become used to his presence, used to the stillness that accompanied him, and yet, today, there was something different. Something soft about the way he moved, the way he looked at her. Jake had been surprisingly open during the day, sharing bits of his life with her, and it had changed the dynamic between them. They weren't just boss and secretary anymore. They were two people, sharing moments, learning more about each other, and in some strange way, it felt easy. Comfortable. They passed by the Trevi fountain, and Allison's gaze instinctively turned toward it. The water glistened under the lights, the sound of it soothing and peaceful. People crowded around the fountain, tossing coins and making wishes, their laughter filling the air. "I've always wanted to come here," Allison said, smiling as she looked at the fountain. "To make a wish." Jake followed her gaze. "What would you wish for?" Allison hesitated for a moment, not sure if she should voice the thoughts swirling in her mind. She wasn't sure how much she should share, especially with Jake. After all, they had spent so much time pretending to keep things professional, so focused on the practicalities of their lives, but for some reason, standing in front of the Trevi fountain, with its magical atmosphere, she found herself wanting to be honest. "I think I'd wish for a new beginning," she said softly. "A chance to start fresh. To not feel stuck in the past." Jake turned to her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, he smiled, his gaze softening. "Maybe that's something we both need," he said quietly. Allison looked at him, startled. "You?" He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah. I've been running from a lot of things for a long time, Allison. Sometimes, it's easier to stay busy than face the things that scare you." Allison's heart fluttered at his words. There was vulnerability in his tone that she hadn't expected. It was as though he had been carrying a heavy weight for a long time, and only now was he willing to share it. "Jake," she began, her voice gentle, "you don't have to run anymore." He glanced at her, his expression softening even further. "I don't know how to stop running," he admitted. "But maybe I'm ready to try." Allison reached out, her hand brushing his arm lightly. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. In that moment, all the barriers between them seemed to disappear. Everything felt more real, more open. Jake's gaze lingered on her hand for a moment before his eyes met hers. He took a deep breath, then gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Let's start with today, then. No more running. Just this." Allison smiled, her heart full. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. They stood there for a few moments, the soft glow of the fountain casting a dreamy light over their faces. The crowd around them continued to toss their coins, lost in their own wishes, while Allison and Jake remained rooted in the moment, connected by something neither of them could quite define, but that was the beauty of it. They didn't need to define it. They didn't need to rush to an answer. For once, they could just be, in a place where the future didn't feel so uncertain. A place where their shared silence spoke volumes. As they walked away from the Trevi fountain, Allison felt a sense of peace wash over her. This trip, this city, it was changing her. Changing both of them. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something more than she could have ever imagined. Chapter 19. Unspoken Thoughts. The sun was dipping below the horizon as Allison and Jake continued their walk through Rome. The city was aglow, basking in the evening light, but their steps were slower now, more deliberate. They had reached a quiet park, away from the crowds, and for the first time that day, they seemed to be alone with their thoughts. Allison glanced up at Jake, noticing the subtle shift in his demeanor. He had been more relaxed today, less the intense boss she had come to know and more of the person she was beginning to understand. "You've been a lot quieter than usual," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. Jake's lips quirked into a small smile. "Just thinking. I've always been more of a thinker than a talker." Allison laughed softly. "You don't say." They stopped at a bench, and Jake sat down, motioning for Allison to join him. She hesitated for a moment, then sat next to him, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Do you ever wish you could just leave everything behind?" Allison asked, her voice quiet but steady. Jake turned his head to look at her, his brow furrowed. "Leave everything behind? What do you mean?" She shrugged, feeling a little exposed in that moment. "I don't know. Sometimes, I wonder if it would be easier if we just stopped. Stopped working so hard, stopped worrying about the future. Maybe we'd be happier." Jake stared at her for a long moment, as though considering her words. "Maybe," he said finally. "But you can't just stop everything, Allison. There's always someone who needs you. The moment you stop, the world keeps going without you." "I guess I know that," she replied softly, her voice tinged with a hint of frustration. "But it's exhausting. I don't think I can keep doing this forever." Jake let out a long sigh, clearly understanding the weight in her words. "I get it. I really do. But you don't have to keep going alone." Allison blinked, her heart skipping a beat. She looked at him, unsure whether she had heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" He looked away, his gaze distant, almost as though he were afraid to say more. But then he turned back to her, his eyes meeting hers with something new, a vulnerability that took her by surprise. "I mean," Jake started, "you don't have to carry all the weight of your world on your own. You don't have to do everything. And you don't have to be perfect. I want to be there for you. Allison's breath caught in her throat. She had always thought of Jake as the person who demanded so much of her, the one who pushed her past her limits. But now, here he was offering her something different. Something she didn't expect. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. But I've always had to handle things by myself, Jake. I'm not used to needing someone else. Jake's expression softened, and he reached out, gently placing his hand on top of hers. I know. But maybe it's time you let someone in. You don't have to do everything alone. Let me help you. The warmth of his hand on hers was enough to make Allison's heart race. She didn't know what to say. She had spent so much of her life guarding herself, not allowing anyone to get too close. But here was Jake offering her support, offering a change she had never expected. Maybe it was time to stop running from what she truly needed. Chapter 20. A shift in perspective. The air was cooler now, the night wrapping itself around them like a blanket, but Allison didn't mind. She was too caught up in the strange warmth of Jake's hand resting over hers. The simple gesture spoke volumes, something deeper than words could convey. He hadn't said anything profound, but the offer was there, unspoken yet clear. Allison shifted slightly, trying to make sense of the swirling thoughts in her head. She had always been the one to keep herself at a distance, not letting anyone get too close. But Jake was different. He had been different from the beginning, in ways she didn't fully understand. I don't know what to say, Allison admitted, glancing at him out of the corner of her eye. Jake's thumb brushed over her hand lightly. You don't have to say anything. Not yet. I'm not asking for anything, Allison. I just want you to know that you don't have to face everything by yourself. Allison nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The sincerity in his voice made something inside her shift, something she had been keeping locked away for far too long. She wasn't used to this kind of support, not from him, not from anyone. But there was something about Jake's presence that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let her guard down. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to be the strong one. She didn't have to carry the weight of everything on her own, but that didn't mean she was ready to admit how much she had been holding back. I've been thinking, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, about everything. About this job, about my life, about you. Jake raised an eyebrow, his gaze now fully focused on her. What about me? Allison hesitated, wondering if she should keep her thoughts to herself. But the honesty in his eyes made it hard to lie, to cover up the truth that was slowly making its way to the surface. I've been so caught up in the idea of being perfect, of doing everything right. But I think I've been missing the point all along. She paused, letting her words sink in, feeling the weight of them. I've been so afraid of failure, of letting anyone down, that I forgot to let myself live. I forgot that it's okay to not have everything figured out. Jake's expression softened as he looked at her, his thumb still lightly stroking her hand. You don't have to be perfect, Allison. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. It's okay to take things one step at a time. Allison's heart skipped a beat. She had spent so long pushing herself, trying to meet expectations, trying to be everything for everyone. But maybe Jake was right. Maybe it was okay to take things slowly, to stop trying to control everything. She glanced up at him, their eyes locking in a moment of silent understanding. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she didn't have to face it alone. I think I'm ready to take that step, she said quietly, her voice full of uncertainty yet determination. Jake smiled, his eyes warm. Good. Because I think we can figure it out together. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air, but there was something comforting about it. They didn't have all the answers yet, but they were no longer afraid to search for them together. Allison squeezed Jake's hand, a small but meaningful gesture. The future felt uncertain, but in that moment, she was willing to face it with him. Chapter 21. Steps forward. The following days were a whirlwind of mixed emotions for Allison. The clarity from her conversation with Jake lingered, but so did the lingering sense of uncertainty. She had been given a new perspective, but the path forward still seemed elusive. She had always been the one to shoulder the weight of her responsibilities, but now, with Jake's unexpected support, She found herself questioning everything she had built around herself. It was as if, for the first time, someone had turned on a light in a room she had kept closed for so long, and now, she could see the dust and clutter that had accumulated over the years. Jake's words echoed in her mind, urging her to take things one step at a time. But how? How could she suddenly step away from the life she had known and let go of all the expectations? Allison sat at her desk in the office, papers scattered in front of her, but her focus was miles away. She was trying, without much success, to bring her thoughts back to the task at hand. Jake had been quieter lately, allowing her the space to process everything. He was still pushing her. Of course, his work ethic never wavered, but there was a subtle shift in how he treated her. Less demanding, more understanding. It was both comforting and unnerving at the same time. Her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a message from him. She hesitated for a moment before unlocking it. Lunch today. I know you've been working hard. Let's take a break. Allison smiled at the message. It was simple, but it meant a lot. Over the past few weeks, she had come to appreciate these small gestures, Jake's way of showing care. Even if it wasn't in the most conventional of ways, she typed back quickly, sounds good. I'll meet you in 30. Jake's response came almost instantly, I'll be there. Don't work too hard. She chuckled softly, setting her phone down. She could almost hear his voice in her head, his tone always so calm, yet with an underlying force that made her want to listen. There was a part of her that felt nervous, unsure of what this lunch might bring, but she couldn't deny the fact that she was looking forward to it. When she arrived at the restaurant, a small, cozy spot near the office, Jake was already there, seated at a table by the window. His presence was both familiar and comforting, the way he sat, poised and collected, his attention on his phone before he noticed her arrival. Allison, he greeted, his face breaking into a small smile as she sat down across from him. You look tired. She chuckled, a bit of self-deprecating humor creeping in. I guess I should be used to it by now. He raised an eyebrow. You really don't have to keep pushing yourself so hard. You know that, right? She hesitated, unsure of how to respond. There was a part of her that wanted to argue, to tell him that she had no choice but to work hard, but the words caught in her throat. I'm trying to get better at it, she finally admitted, looking down at the menu. I guess it's harder than I thought. Jake leaned back slightly, studying her. You don't have to be perfect, Allison. Not for me, not for anyone. His words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Allison felt something shift. It wasn't just his offer of support, it was something deeper. He wasn't asking for her to change who she was. He wasn't asking for her to suddenly be different. He was simply accepting her as she was, imperfections and all. The realization hit her then, maybe she had been so focused on being perfect because she had never allowed herself to be vulnerable. But Jake made it feel safe to be imperfect. I think I'm learning, she said softly, meeting his eyes. Learning that I don't have to do everything alone. And maybe it's okay to need someone else. Jake's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Allison saw the depth of his emotions, the tenderness beneath the facade of the cool, composed boss. It was there, in his eyes, in the way he looked at her as though she mattered. You never have to be alone, Jake replied quietly, his voice carrying a sincerity that she couldn't ignore. I'm here, Allison. Always. The words settled in her chest, a quiet comfort she hadn't realized she'd been searching for. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was enough. For the first time in a long while, Allison felt like she could breathe, and for the first time, she felt like it was okay to step forward into whatever this was, whatever they were building together. Chapter 22, taking chances. The days that followed were different. Not in the dramatic, life-changing sense, but in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. Allison found herself breathing a little easier, moving through her daily routines with a newfound sense of clarity. She wasn't so weighed down by the pressure to be perfect anymore. Jake's words had lingered, comforting her in the quiet moments, and she felt the difference in the way she approached her work and, most importantly, herself. Even though Jake had continued to push her in his own way, his support was like a steady current beneath the surface. He wasn't constantly hovering, but there was this understanding between them, now unspoken, but real. He trusted her, and that trust, oddly enough, made her feel more capable than ever. One morning, as Allison sat in her office, sipping on a cup of coffee, she noticed the time, just past 10 a.m. It was her usual break time, a small routine she had come to appreciate. She glanced over her to-do list, feeling that familiar twinge of anxiety, but before she could convince herself to keep working, her phone buzzed again. It was from Jake. Lunch? I've been thinking. I want to ask you something. Allison frowned slightly, trying to decipher the message. He wanted to ask her something? She wasn't sure if that made her nervous or intrigued. Sure, I'll meet you in an hour. Jake's reply was quick, almost too quick. Perfect. I'll see you soon. There was something about his tone, something that felt like it was leading up to something important. Allison couldn't shake the feeling that today might bring more than just a casual lunch. When she walked into the restaurant, Jake was already seated at their usual table. This time, though, his expression was more serious than usual. As she approached, he stood up, a little faster than normal, and gestured for her to sit down. Is everything okay? Allison asked, setting her purse down, her curiosity piqued. Jake smiled faintly but didn't immediately respond. Instead, he folded his hands together on the table, his gaze never leaving her face. I've been thinking about something, Allison. About us. Allison's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't been expecting this. Sure, they had shared some intimate moments, opened up to each other in ways she hadn't with anyone else, but the idea of them together was still a strange concept in her mind. What about us? She asked, her voice a little shakier than she intended. Jake leaned in slightly, his eyes serious but warm. I know this might sound forward, but I can't stop thinking about how much you've changed things for me. I've been caught up in work and expectations for so long that I didn't realize how much I needed someone like you in my life. And I'm not talking about the assistant role, I mean, you. Allison blinked, unsure of how to respond. The words were out in the open now, hanging between them, and the weight of them sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't just about work. This was about something deeper, something real. I've been giving it a lot of thought, Jake continued, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. And I want to know if you'd consider us. If we could take a chance on this. On us. Allison's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this. She wasn't even sure if she wanted to be ready. The fear of making a mistake, of letting herself fall too deeply into something she didn't understand, was overwhelming. But then she looked at Jake. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the openness he was offering her. It was rare, too rare, and for some reason, it felt right. I don't know, Jake, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not sure if I'm ready for something like that. I've always kept my distance, always focused on my work because it's safe. But you're asking me to take a risk, to trust, and I'm scared. Jake's expression softened, and he reached across the table, gently placing his hand over hers. The simple touch was grounding, steadying her in a way she hadn't expected. I'm not asking for an answer right now, he said quietly. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to take the risk if you are. We don't have to figure everything out today. But I need you to know that I'm serious about this. About us. Allison sat in stunned silence for a moment, her heart racing in her chest. She had never expected Jake to be this open, this vulnerable. He had always been the boss, the one in control, but now he was laying it all out there, offering her something she never thought she would receive. A chance to trust, a chance to be something more. Her fingers tightened around his hand as the words finally slipped past her lips. I'm willing to take that chance, she said, her voice steadier now. With you. Jake's eyes softened, and for the first time, he smiled, not his usual reserved smile, but one full of warmth and possibility. Good, he whispered, his hand squeezing hers gently. We'll take it one step at a time, together. And for the first time in a long while, Allison felt like she wasn't walking this path alone. Chapter 23. New beginnings. The next few weeks passed in a blur, but in a good way. Allison was slowly learning how to balance her work with Jake's unexpected presence in her life. She wasn't completely sure of where things were headed, but there was something comforting about being with him, about knowing that, even if she stumbled, he would be there to catch her. Their lunches together had become a sort of ritual, an escape from the tension of the office. And slowly, Jake's once stern and impersonal demeanor had softened. It was like she was seeing a different side of him. No longer just the cold, demanding boss, but a man who cared, who was willing to take a chance on something he'd never dared to before. As Allison grew more comfortable with him, she also noticed how her own confidence was shifting. Her desire to do everything on her own was slowly being replaced with a willingness to rely on others, on Jake, in particular. She still had her doubts, still wasn't sure what the future held, but she was starting to realize that maybe she didn't need to figure everything out immediately. Maybe it was okay to take things one step at a time. One evening, as Allison finished up her work for the day, she received a message from Jake. "Meet me in the lobby. I have something for you." Her heart skipped a beat. What could it be? She quickly grabbed her bag and made her way to the lobby. Her curiosity piqued when she arrived. She saw Jake standing near the entrance, holding a small, neatly wrapped package. He looked up when he saw her and, without a word, handed it over. "Open it," he said softly. Allison smiled at the gesture. She carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a small notebook. It was simple, black leather, the kind of thing she'd never have bought for herself, but it felt significant, like something more than just a gift. "Jake, what's this for?" she asked, looking up at him. He met her gaze, his eyes serious. "It's for you to write in. I know you've been pushing yourself hard, and I thought it might help to have something for your thoughts. Something just for you." Allison was speechless for a moment, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. It was simple, but it meant more than any extravagant gift could. "Thank you," she whispered, her heart swelling with emotion. She hadn't realized until that moment just how much she had needed something like this. Jake gave her a small smile. "I know you don't always take care of yourself. But you should. And I want you to remember that. I'm here, Allison. Whenever you need me." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't just about the notebook. It was about the understanding, the support that Jake was offering her. Later that evening, as she sat in her apartment, Allison opened the notebook and began to write. She poured her thoughts into it, things she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge before, her dreams, her fears, and her growing feelings for Jake. It felt good, liberating even, to finally express herself. For so long, she had kept everything bottled up inside, too afraid to let anyone in. But now, with Jake's unwavering support, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to take a leap of faith. Chapter 24. A step closer. Weeks turned into months, and the changes in Allison were undeniable. She was more confident, more assertive. She was still the same hardworking, focused woman, but now there was a balance, a sense of ease that she hadn't experienced before. She had grown used to Jake's presence in her life. The lunches, the quiet moments they shared, the subtle gestures that spoke louder than words, everything felt right, even when it was hard. And while she wasn't quite ready to throw herself completely into the idea of a relationship, she couldn't ignore the way she felt when she was with him. But the real breakthrough came one evening, when she found herself standing in front of his office door after hours. She had just finished up some work and, without thinking, had gone to drop off a report. But when she saw Jake sitting at his desk, head buried in paperwork, something inside her shifted. He looked up when she knocked, his tired eyes softening when he saw her. "Allison," he said, standing up. "What are you doing here?" She hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, holding up the report. "I thought I'd drop this off for you." Jake nodded but didn't immediately take the report. Instead, he studied her for a moment, as though weighing something. Then, his expression softened, and he stepped closer. "You've been working so hard," he said quietly. "I hope you know that you don't have to keep pushing yourself like this. I'm not going anywhere, Allison. You don't have to do everything alone." Allison swallowed, feeling a wave of emotion flood her chest. She had been so caught up in her own need to prove herself that she hadn't realized just how much Jake had been there for her, how much he truly cared. "I know," she whispered. "But I'm still learning." Jake smiled, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "And I'll be here to help you, every step of the way." In that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The doubts, the fears, they all faded away. For the first time in a long while, Allison allowed herself to simply be. And for the first time, she realized that she wasn't alone in this. Chapter 25. Together. The final chapter of Allison's journey didn't come in a grand, dramatic moment. There was no sudden revelation or life-altering event. It came in the quiet, everyday moments, the ones she had once overlooked. As the weeks passed, Allison continued to grow, both in her work and in her personal life. Jake remained by her side, not as the demanding boss, but as someone who genuinely cared about her well-being. Their connection deepened, built on mutual respect, shared laughter, and the kind of understanding that only comes when two people truly see each other. One evening, after a long day of work, Allison sat with Jake in the cozy office lounge, her feet tucked underneath her as they shared a quiet moment. There were no words, no expectations, just the comfort of being together. Jake reached over, gently squeezing her hand. "I don't have all the answers, Allison," he said quietly, "but I know that I want you in my life. No matter what." Allison smiled, her heart full. "I think I'm starting to feel the same way." And with that, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together.
Jake's POV: I've never been one for emotions. I didn't grow up with them. Business, efficiency, results, those were the things that mattered to me. My life had been all about control. I liked things planned, predictable, and within my grasp. Everything had its place, and everything operated within that place. That was until she came into my life. Allison. My assistant. My secret weapon. The one person who, without even trying, broke through my walls, making me question everything I thought I knew about myself. It started off simple enough. She was just another cog in the machine, another person I could rely on for the countless tasks I had no time or patience for. But over time, I noticed things about her. How she would smile faintly when things got stressful, how she never backed down when I piled work on her, how she always found a way to help even when she was clearly exhausted, and somehow, despite my attempts to keep things strictly professional, I found myself caring. I couldn't help it. She made me want to protect her, keep her close, make sure she was okay. But, of course, I couldn't let her see that. If I did, it would change everything. She'd see that I wasn't this impenetrable boss everyone thought I was. She'd see that I was just a man, one who had no idea how to express what was swirling inside. I've tried. In my own awkward, clumsy way, I've tried to take care of her. I made her eat because I knew she wasn't eating enough. I pushed her to take breaks, to stop working herself into the ground. But every time I saw her, I just couldn't seem to do enough. She was always so determined to handle everything on her own. I thought that maybe if I showed her how much I cared, she'd finally understand. But I didn't know how to say it. I wasn't good with words. I wasn't good at showing vulnerability, either. My solution was simple: keep her by my side. Keep her close where I could make sure she was okay, even if she didn't always see it. It wasn't until I gave her that notebook that I realized how much she had already changed me. It wasn't about controlling everything anymore. It wasn't about being the boss all the time. It was about letting her in, letting her see me for who I was, flaws and all. And maybe, just maybe, letting her be a part of something I had never allowed anyone else to be a part of. But I also had to ask myself, why was I so afraid to admit it? Why couldn't I just tell her the truth? That I needed her more than she could ever understand. When I told her I wanted to take a chance on us, I wasn't expecting it to be easy. I wasn't expecting her to just fall into my arms and say she felt the same way. But I needed her to know that I was serious. I needed her to see that I wanted more than just an assistant. I wanted her in my life, and when she said she was willing to take that chance, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There it was, something I hadn't realized I wanted until now. It wasn't just about work. It wasn't just about power and control. It was about the quiet moments. It was about letting go of all the masks I'd worn for so long and just being with her. I wasn't perfect. I never had been. But with her, I felt like I was allowed to be something more than just a boss, and that's when I realized something else. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of taking a risk. I was willing to take that leap, if she was willing to take it with me, and that meant everything. I've never been good at expressing myself. Emotions always seemed like something to be avoided, boxed up neatly where no one could see. I was taught to keep things efficient, to think logically. That was how I'd gotten to where I was, a brilliant businessman, a leader, a man everyone feared. Control was my fortress. But then Allison stepped into my life, and suddenly everything I thought I knew didn't seem so important anymore. From the beginning, I noticed her strength, how she worked tirelessly, always giving her best, even when she was barely holding herself together. I saw how she hid her exhaustion, how she was always focused on making everything perfect. She was perfect, in her own way, but in a way that made me want to protect her. I never planned to let her get this close. But I did. Without even realizing it, I became attached to her. And I found myself caring more than I ever wanted to. I tried to show it, offering her lunch, asking if she was okay, taking care of the smallest details. But I never told her. I never let myself admit that I needed her. And when she refused my attempts to make her eat, or when she pushed herself past her limits, I could feel a part of me breaking, because I knew deep down, it wasn't just about the food or the work anymore. It was about her. When I gave her that notebook, it wasn't just a gift. It was me saying, "I see you." It was me admitting that I wanted to be there for her in a way I couldn't figure out how to say. It was a symbol of the change I was going through. I kept my distance, in a way, because I was scared. Scared that if I told her what I really felt, it would ruin everything. But when she opened up to me, when she started letting herself be more vulnerable, it all made sense. I didn't need to hide behind my boss persona. I loved her. I wasn't sure how or when it happened, but I did. And in that moment, when she stood in front of me, with her own hopes and fears, I knew I was ready. Ready to take a leap, to take a chance on us. I never thought I'd want someone in my life this way. But now that I had her, now that I finally realized it wasn't just about me anymore, I would do anything to make it work. I wasn't perfect. I didn't know all the answers. But I was ready to figure it out with her by my side. No more masks, no more pretending. Just us, facing the unknown together, and in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, love was the one thing worth taking a risk for.